Thank you for joining your desert frontiersman Alan for more Southwest Lost Tales. Enjoy while you relax. Please leave a like, comment, and share. For further desert adventures, hit the subscribe button. Hit the bell to be notified of new videos. If you would like to help support my channel and time, hit the super thanks heart icon on the bottom of the video and contribute. This is very helpful. Welcome to the Southwest Desert Channel, where we explore the lives of remarkable individuals of the Southwest. Today, we're diving into the fascinating story of Dr. Herbert Eugene Bolton, a historian who revolutionized the study of American history by uncovering the rich tapestry of Spanish exploration and colonization in the Americas. Imagine a young historian from Texas knocking on the gates of an ancient monastery in Querétaro, Mexico, 100 miles north of Mexico City. The year is around 1900, and this seemingly ordinary event would spark a lifelong quest that would redefine how we understand the history of the Americas. This young historian was Herbert Eugene Bolton, and his journey from a Wisconsin native to a renowned expert on Spanish-American history is nothing short of extraordinary. When Bolton left his home to teach medieval history at the University of Texas at the turn of the 20th century, his friends thought he was exiling himself to a land of rattlesnakes and wild Indians. Little did they know that this Yankee invader was about to stumble upon a historical gold mine that would completely reorient the study and teaching of American history. Picture Bolton standing in the monastery of the College of the Holy Cross in Querétaro. After days of polite conversation and careful maneuvering, he finally musters the courage to ask about the trapdoor in the ceiling. "Do you think there might be old manuscripts up there?" he inquires nonchalantly. The padres, taken aback by this direct question, exchange glances. After a long moment, one of them answers non-committally, "Quién sabe? Who knows?" But Bolton's disarming smile and evident interest in their monastery finally win them over. A ladder is produced, and up scrambles the professor into the dusty attic under the watchful gaze of his hosts. In the dark recesses of the loft stands a huge 18th century chest, securely locked. After a prolonged search, a key is unearthed. To everyone's wonderment, inside the chest are bundle upon bundle of neatly tied manuscripts, priceless records of colonial New Spain. This scene would play out countless times over the next 2 decades as Bolton crisscrossed Mexico and Europe, sifting through archives, visiting old monasteries, and making friends with officials and padres. In the process, he examined a staggering 1,000,000 pages of original manuscripts, many of which hadn't been opened since they were filed away centuries ago. While many adventurers sought gold and jewels, Bolton found his treasure in dusty archives. His discoveries would bring him more thrill and lasting renown than any material wealth could provide. In the Archivo General in Mexico City alone, he explored more than 100,000 volumes of bound manuscripts, not to mention the countless unbound records lying untouched in numerous pueblos and obscure conventos. Bolton's work was so thorough and valuable that his Guide to Materials for United States History in the Archives of Mexico, published in 1913 with financial aid from the Carnegie Institution, became the official catalog used by the Mexican government for their own records. They affectionately called it La Biblia, the Bible. Bolton's research led him to a groundbreaking realization. The history of the United States couldn't be fully understood without considering the broader context of Spanish America. He discovered that long before the Pilgrims landed at Plymouth Rock or the English established Jamestown, Spanish explorers and missionaries had already traversed much of what would become the United States. This perspective was revolutionary at the time. It challenged the Anglo-centric view of American history that had dominated academic circles. Bolton's work brought to light the stories of Spanish explorers, missionaries, and settlers who had played crucial roles in shaping the early history of the Americas. But Bolton wasn't content with just discovering these historical treasures. He wanted to bring them to life. His writing style was far from the dry, academic prose one might expect. As the American Historical Review noted, Bolton masks his broad yet exact scholarship under an entertaining, even colloquial style. He famously quipped, "A textbook is the pulp of an orange that has been sucked dry," highlighting his commitment to making history vibrant and accessible. His books, including Rim of Christendom, Padre on Horseback, Outposts of Empire, Spanish Borderlands, and Spanish Exploration in the Southwest, became cornerstones for anyone interested in the Spanish history of the Americas. These works didn't just recount events, they transported readers to the time of conquistadors and padres, making figures like Eusebio Kino, Juan Bautista de Anza, and Francisco Vázquez de Coronado come alive on the page. But Bolton's passion for history didn't stop at the archives. He believed in experiencing the journeys of these historical figures firsthand. Over his career, he retraced the routes of Spanish explorers, covering more than 10,000 miles across Mexico and the American Southwest. Equally as intriguing as my adventures in archives, Bolton once commented, has been my odyssey on the trails of Kino, of Coronado, and of Anza. His travels took him from the Italian Alps, where Kino was born, through Germany and Spain, to Mexico, Lower California, and across the rugged terrain of Sonora and Arizona. Imagine Bolton, well into his 60s, bumping along in a Ford on the rough roads of Sonora, or trekking 14 miles through the scorching desert to visit the Cabeza Prieta water tanks, where Anza once revived his thirsty caravan. These expeditions weren't just academic exercises. They were adventures that brought him face to face with the challenges and wonders experienced by the explorers he studied. One particularly memorable trip saw Bolton, accompanied by Dean Frank C. Lockwood and 2 University of Arizona students, retracing Anza's route from Tubac to Yuma. They traveled along the infamous Camino del Diablo, or Devil's Highway, a stretch of over 100 miles of arid desert where scores of gold rush prospectors had perished. Bolton's dedication to accuracy led him to identify nearly every water hole and campsite mentioned in the explorers' diaries, bringing their journeys into sharp focus for modern historians. He described the Cabeza Prieta tanks, a series of natural water reservoirs in the desert, with the precision of a scientist and the wonder of an explorer. The 6 main tanks are on 6 different levels, like the steps of stairs, close together and easily accessible to each other, the overflow of all being drained by a common channel worn through the ages in the solid rock. Bolton's field expeditions were not without their share of excitement and mishaps. One time, while crossing over the mountains from Magdalena with his son and a single horse, Bolton found himself traversing the same canyon where, just days before, Yaqui Indians had waylaid half a dozen Mexicans. Such close brushes with danger were par for the course in Bolton's quest to retrace the steps of the Spanish explorers. Despite his monumental contributions to the field of history, Bolton remained remarkably humble. When asked about himself, he would often deflect, saying, "I don't count. The trailblazers of the past and you, the builders for the future, are my concern." This humility, combined with his legendary absent-mindedness when engrossed in research, made Bolton a beloved figure on campus. Stories circulated about him working through the night, his office light a beacon of scholarly dedication. One tale, which Bolton himself denied, had him failing to recognize his own daughter when she offered him a ride home, supposedly replying, "Thank you, but I am waiting for my daughter." But behind these amusing anecdotes was a man of incredible intellect and curiosity. Bolton had a vital interest in his students, many of whom went on to hold distinguished professorships and diplomatic posts. He saw his work not just as uncovering the past, but as laying the groundwork for future generations to build upon. Bolton's approach to studying history, which came to be known as the Bolton method, emphasized the importance of using primary sources and conducting field work. He encouraged his students to go beyond textbooks and to engage directly with historical documents and the physical landscapes where history unfolded. This method was revolutionary in its time and continues to influence historians today. Bolton believed that to truly understand history, one needed to immerse oneself in it, whether that meant poring over centuries-old manuscripts or retracing the steps of long-dead explorers across desert and mountain. Even after his official retirement at the age of 70 in 1940, Bolton couldn't stay away from the work he loved. The demands of World War II brought him back to active teaching, and he continued to give lectures, attend conferences, and, of course, research and write. His energy seemed boundless. At an age when many would be content to rest on their laurels, Bolton was embarking on new adventures. In one particularly memorable incident, he joined a 200-mile descent of the Colorado River, insisting on making only one portage instead of the usual 6 or 7, a testament to his enduring spirit of exploration. Bolton's work didn't just change how we view the history of the American Southwest. It transformed our understanding of the entire Western Hemisphere. He showed that the history of the Americas was not just a series of isolated national stories, but a complex, interconnected tapestry of cultures and civilizations. His contributions were recognized far and wide. He received numerous honorary degrees and professorships from Spanish-American universities. In 1925, the Spanish crown decorated him as Comendador de la Real Orden de Isabel la Católica, acknowledging his pivotal role in illuminating Spain's historical legacy in the Americas. Bolton's research brought to light the stories of figures like Eusebio Francisco Quino, whom he described as the most picturesque missionary pioneer of all North America. Explorer, astronomer, cartographer, mission builder, ranchman, cattle king, and defender of the frontier. Through Bolton's work, we learned about Quino's crucial role in founding missions, introducing European crops and cattle ranching to the Southwest, and mapping vast swaths of then unknown territory. Similarly, Bolton's research on Juan Bautista de Anza highlighted the importance of Spanish expeditions in opening up overland routes to California. He compared Anza's achievements to those of Lewis and Clark, noting, "As an explorer, Anza stands beside Lewis and Clark. As a colony leader, it is difficult to find anyone in Anglo-American annals with whom to compare him, unless it might be Stephen F. Austin." As we conclude this tale, let's remember Herbert Eugene Bolton, not just as a historian, but as a trailblazer in his own right. A man who, armed with nothing more than curiosity and determination, uncovered a hidden chapter of American history, and in doing so, changed the way we see our shared past. Thank you for joining us on this journey through the life of Herbert Eugene Bolton. Until next time, keep exploring, keep questioning, and remember, history is always more complex and fascinating than we imagine. In the words of Bolton himself, we are all builders for the future, and by understanding our past, we can better shape our shared future. Welcome to our channel on lost history and legends of the Southwest Desert. Today, we're diving into the remarkable life of William Phipps Blake, a pioneering geologist whose work shaped our understanding of the American West. Though his name may not be widely recognized today, Blake's contributions to science, exploration, and even international relations were truly extraordinary. Born in New York City in 1826, William P. Blake showed promise from an early age. He pursued his education with vigor, eventually earning his doctorate in philosophy from Yale University in 1852. Even as a young man, Blake stood out. His robust health, premature gray hair, and keen intellect made him a sought-after figure in scientific circles. But it was in 1853, at the age of 27, that Blake would embark on the journey that would define much of his legacy. As part of an Army engineering expedition led by Lieutenant R.S. Williamson, Blake found himself in Southern California, tasked with surveying potential routes for a transcontinental railroad. During a crisp autumn morning in what is now Imperial County, California, Blake stands atop Travertine Point, his eyes scanning the vast, sun-baked landscape below. Beside him, a Kawiyu Indian chief gestures towards the horizon, telling a story that would captivate the young geologist. Through an interpreter, the chief spoke of a great lake that once filled the basin before them. He described how the waters had receded, forcing his ancestors to move their villages, only to return later and overwhelm many of his people. As Blake listened, his scientific mind was already piecing together the geological puzzle before him. This encounter marked Blake as the first white man to examine the great below-sea-level basin with a scientist's eye. What he found was remarkable. The basin, now mostly dry, had once been an inland sea stretching 110 miles long and 34 miles wide. Blake meticulously documented evidence supporting the chief's tale. There were travertine-coated rocks along an ancient shoreline, millions of tiny marine shells in the sand. In his reports, Blake paid tribute to the indigenous people who had long inhabited the area. He named the ancient body of water Lake Cahuilla, honoring the Cahuilla people. But Blake's contributions to our understanding of this region didn't stop there. He also gave a name to the surrounding area, the Colorado Desert. This wasn't a reference to the state of Colorado, but rather to the Spanish word for red, describing the color of the desert floor, rich with silt deposited over millennia. It's important to note that Blake didn't claim to be the first to recognize the basin's history. He acknowledged earlier observations by explorers like Sebastian, Anza, and the Sonora gold seekers. Blake's work in the Colorado Desert was part of a larger mission. President Franklin Pierce, recognizing the need to connect the growing nation, had ordered the Army to find a feasible route for a railroad from the Mississippi River to the Pacific Ocean. Blake's geological expertise was crucial to this endeavor. As the expedition moved south from San Francisco, Blake roamed freely, pick in hand, collecting specimens and making observations. His thorough work would later prove invaluable to railroad companies as they laid tracks along the very routes Blake and his colleagues had surveyed. One of Blake's key insights during this expedition was his understanding of the geological history of the basin. He concluded that it had once been an extension of the Gulf of California, cut off by massive silt deposits from the Colorado River during the glacial age. This formed a natural dike, occasionally breached by the mightiest river floods. Blake's career was marked by an incredible diversity of projects and achievements. After completing his work with the Williamson expedition, he turned his attention to the California gold fields, producing scientific reports on the mother lode. In 1857, he joined another expedition, this time with Lieutenant Edward F. Beale, surveying a wagon road across northern Arizona. This adventure included an unusual element, a herd of camels imported as an experiment by Secretary of War Jefferson Davis. While many in the party complained about the ill-tempered, smelly animals, Blake maintained his scientific focus, excitedly documenting the discovery of ancient turquoise mines once worked by the Aztecs. Blake's expertise took him far beyond the American West. In 1861, he accepted a commission as a mining engineer for the Japanese government, where he established the country's first mining college. The following year found him in Alaska, ascending the Stikine River and producing reports that would play a crucial role in the United States' decision to purchase the territory from Russia. Interestingly, Blake's name is rarely mentioned in connection with the Alaska Purchase, despite the importance of his work. This speaks to a defining characteristic of the man, his modesty and lack of self-promotion. Throughout his career, Blake seemed more interested in the work itself than in garnering personal accolades. In 1864, Blake's expertise was recognized with an appointment as professor of geology and mining at the newly established University of California. There, he organized the College of Mining and Agriculture, laying the groundwork for what would become world-renowned programs. During his time in California, Blake also turned his attention to the Yosemite Valley. He became the first to propose that the valley had been primarily shaped by erosional processes, with glaciation playing a secondary role. This was a groundbreaking idea at the time, though Blake's typically modest approach meant that his theory didn't receive the wide attention it deserved. Blake's reputation continued to grow on the international stage. He represented the Pacific Coast states as a U.S. commissioner to the Paris Exposition of 1867, later editing the State Department's reports on the commission. This began a long period of involvement with world expositions, where Blake's skillfully arranged exhibits revealed the West's great mineral resources to a global audience. His work didn't go unrecognized. In 1878, Blake received the Chevalier of the Legion of Honor decoration from France after winning the grand prize at the Paris Exposition. Yet, true to form, these accolades didn't slow him down. He returned to the American West, where his practical geological expertise was in high demand. In 1890, at an age when many might consider retirement, Blake invented a new revolving calcining furnace. This innovative spirit ran in his family. His maternal grandfather, Captain Jonathan Mix, had invented the carriage spring, while his father, Dr. William Blake of New York, was a pioneer in modern dental techniques. One of the most poignant moments in Blake's career came in 1906, when he returned to Travertine Point, the same spot where, 53 years earlier, he had heard the Cahuilla chief's story about the ancient lake. Now, 80 years old, with pure white hair and a flowing beard, Blake witnessed a new chapter in the region's history unfolding. The Colorado River, breaking through man-made levees, threatened to flood the nascent agricultural empire of the Imperial Valley. As the world's newspapers covered the dramatic efforts to stem the flow, Blake quietly provided the historical and geological context. He reviewed and expanded upon his old report, creating what was the definitive text on Imperial County's geology. From 1895 until his death in 1910, Blake made his home in Tucson, Arizona. He served as professor of geology and mining at the University of Arizona and director of the School of Mines. In 1905, he became professor emeritus and geologist of the state of Arizona. Even in his later years, Blake's enthusiasm for his work never dimmed. His bright eyes and genial smile endeared him to students and colleagues alike. Evening gatherings at his home became prized events, with the professor's face glowing as he shared his vast knowledge and experiences. William P. Blake's legacy is not one of fame or fortune, but of quiet, persistent, and groundbreaking work that shaped our understanding of the American West and beyond. His contributions span geology, mining, education, and even international relations. Yet despite his numerous achievements, Blake remained modest and focused on the work itself rather than personal glory. One of the few personal descriptions we have of Blake comes from R.W. Raymond, secretary of the American Institute of Mining Engineers, who wrote, "He told a fact as though he had only just discovered it, and had an unusual capacity for delivering an oral abstract with grace, directness, and lucidity." As we reflect on Blake's life and work, we're reminded of the countless unsung heroes whose efforts have shaped our world. William P. Blake may not be a household name, but his contributions to geology, exploration, and education have left an indelible mark on American history. Thank you for joining us on this exploration of the life of William P. Blake, pioneering geologist and unsung hero of Western exploration. Until next time, keep your curiosity alive and your eyes open to the wonders of the world around you. Welcome to another episode of the Southwest Desert, where we explore the fascinating true tales and legends of the Southwest. Today, we delve into the extraordinary story of Frank Hamilton Cushing, a man who bridged the gap between two worlds and became one of the first to give Americans an intimate look into the life of the Pueblo Native Americans. Frank Cushing was born in 1857 in central New York. From a young age, he displayed an uncanny aptitude for unearthing Native American relics and mastering primitive Native American arts. As a child, he was allowed to roam freely in the woods surrounding his home, where he came into contact with remnants of Native American tribes still living in the area. By the tender age of 16, Cushing was already making significant contributions to the field of archaeology. He spent his time digging in rubbish heaps left by Native Americans at their campsites, discovering a wealth of material that was rapidly disappearing due to the ignorance of settlers. His dedication and skill were evident early on, as he wrote a paper on the antiquities of Orleans County at just 17, which was published in that year's Smithsonian Report. Our story truly begins on a hot September afternoon in 1879. Picture a weary traveler making his way up a narrow valley in the mountains of northwestern New Mexico. This was Frank Hamilton Cushing, fresh from Washington, D.C., and his destination was the Pueblo of Zuni. Zuni, nestled high in the Zuni Mountains, had existed for centuries, relatively unknown and little understood by outsiders. Cushing was part of a group of investigators led by Colonel James Stevenson, sent by the Smithsonian to collect data on the Pueblo Native Americans. While the rest of the party visited Hopi villages in Arizona, Cushing made the bold decision to study Zuni alone. After resting at Fort Wingate, Cushing, eager to reach Zuni, set off alone on a government mule to cover the 40 miles of uninhabited terrain. It's worth noting that he had never been in a saddle before, and his inexperience showed as he constantly had to prod the stubborn beast forward. As the day waned and Cushing's uncertainty about the village's location grew, he suddenly found himself on a sandy plain through which flowed the Zuni River. It was here that he had his first encounter with a Zuni native, a boy herding sheep and goats. This meeting proved pivotal. The boy greeted Cushing with, "Hi, hi," extending his hand. Cushing, quick to adapt, shook the boy's hand heartily and inquired about Zuni. The boy's affirmative response, was accompanied by an act that would prove crucial. He breathed on Cushing's hand. Cushing, displaying remarkable cultural sensitivity, returned the gesture. This simple act of breathtaking would become the key that unlocked the outer fortress of Zuni Reserve. It's a testament to Cushing's adaptability and keen observation skills, traits that would serve him well in the coming months and years. Upon entering the town, Cushing found himself in the middle of a dance ceremony. The Zuni leader initially appeared unfriendly, but Cushing's use of the newly acquired greeting changed the atmosphere dramatically. A general breathtaking and giving ensued, marking Cushing's first step towards acceptance in the community. However, Cushing's enthusiasm for documenting the sacred dances soon led to a serious crisis. His attempts to sketch the ceremonies were met with strong resistance from the Zuni, who objected to him making shadows of their sacred rituals. Despite this tension, Cushing was invited by the chieftain to move into the common living and sleeping room of the chief and his wife. Cushing set up his hammock opposite the fireplace, integrating himself further into Zuni daily life. The conflict over Cushing's sketching reached a boiling point during the knife dance ceremony. Despite warnings from the chief, Cushing refused to stay away from this ritual. His defiance led to a dangerous confrontation. As the ceremony began, two masked and painted men carrying war clubs charged towards Cushing, shouting, "Kill him! Kill him!" In a moment of quick thinking, Cushing drew his hunting knife and waved it over his head. The sunlight caught the blade, reflecting brilliantly on the crowd. This unintended salute to the sun gave the dancers pause, and they retreated, saying, "We've made a mistake." In a surprising turn of events, the dancers returned with a yelping dog, which they killed to fulfill their vow of death. This incident, fraught with danger, actually secured Cushing's place among the Zuni. As he later remarked, "That day had won for me the truest of friends and decided the fate of my mission to the Zunis." Following this pivotal event, Cushing's immersion in Zuni culture deepened significantly. He was given Zuni food exclusively, and a complete Zuni costume replaced his American clothes. This transformation was met with enthusiasm by the Zuni, though his American friends feared he had lapsed into savagery. Cushing was then installed in a newly whitewashed small room, given sheepskins for his bed on the floor to harden his meat, and provided with 2 handmade wool blankets. His sponsor advised him, "If you're cold, just say you're not. That's the way a Zuni does." In a symbolic gesture, the chief cut down Cushing's hammock, severing his last link with civilization. The harsh Zuni winter took its toll on Cushing's health. After a long ceremonial in an overheated kiva, exposure to cold wind brought on a chill, and Cushing contracted pneumonia. During his slow convalescence, the chief took the opportunity to instruct him in the intricacies of the Zuni language. Cushing proved to be an apt pupil. Before the end of his first year in Zuni, he had become proficient in the Zuni tongue. This linguistic achievement would prove invaluable in his anthropological work, allowing him to translate most of the long Zuni creation myth, a task made difficult by its archaic terms but deeply rooted in ancient traditions and rituals. Cushing's integration into Zuni society reached new heights when he consented to have his ears pierced, a symbol of his adoption into the Zuni fellowship as a child of the sun. He was made a member of the Macaw clan and christened as Medicine Flower, a name reserved for only one person in a generation. This level of acceptance gave Cushing unprecedented access to Zuni ceremonial life. He discovered a highly organized system of social and religious culture in this supposedly uncivilized people. His curiosity led him to witness the secret installation of the newly elected Koyamachi, or guardians of the sacred dance, also known as delight makers. Cushing's timing allowed him to experience the Shalako ceremonies, a pivotal event in the Zuni calendar. Held in early December, these ceremonies serve as both a housewarming and a harvest home festival. The event begins at dusk with the arrival of immense white-robed Shalako figures who perform blessings on each new house built in Zuni during the past year. The ceremony continues through the night, culminating in a dawn salute to the waning sun, marking the beginning of the new year. This 18-hour spectacle is followed by the arrival of the sacred kaka, another important spiritual entity in Zuni culture. Perhaps one of the most remarkable episodes in Cushing's time with the Zuni was the expedition to the Ocean of Sunrise. The Zuni had a legend of a great body of water to the east, which they had never seen but knew of through prayers and stories passed down through generations. When Cushing suggested that a trip to this almost mythical ocean was possible, the Zuni promised him entry into the Order of the Sacred Kaka. After much discussion, 6 individuals were chosen for the journey. The preparation for this journey was intense and involved the careful transportation of sacred items for ceremonies at the ocean. On February 22, 1882, amid prayerful farewells, the group embarked on their journey east by train. The Zuni delegation's first stop was Washington, D.C., where they had the honor of shaking hands with President Chester Arthur. From there, they traveled to Boston, chosen as the site for their formal visit to the Atlantic Ocean. In a touching ceremony on Deer Island, the Zuni performed sacred rites at the ocean's edge. They scattered prayer meal over the waters, dipped sacred vessels full of ocean water, and sang ancient chants. The ceremony concluded with an all-encompassing prayer for the entire animate world, even the creeping and most vile and insignificant beings. After his time in Zuni, Cushing's health began to decline. He married Emily McGill in Washington, and she accompanied him back to Zuni in the fall of 1882, helping to supervise his diet. However, by May 1884, his health had deteriorated to the point where he was forced to leave Zuni permanently. Despite his physical challenges, Cushing's indomitable will kept him working at the Smithsonian until 1886. In his final years, he conducted research on the pre-Columbian sea-dwelling people of the Florida Keys. Tragically, Frank Cushing's life was cut short. On April 10, 1900, while preparing his Florida discoveries for publication, he met his untimely death. Frank Hamilton Cushing's story is one of remarkable cultural immersion and groundbreaking anthropological work. His willingness to fully embed himself in Zuni culture, learning their language, participating in their ceremonies, and even adopting their dress and customs set a new standard for anthropological research. Cushing's work provided Americans with an unprecedented, intimate look into the life of the Pueblo Native Americans. His writings, both scientific and literary, have left an indelible mark on the field of anthropology and our understanding of Native American cultures. From his early days as a curious child in the woods of New York to his daring adventures in Zuni and his final research in Florida, Cushing's life was dedicated to bridging cultural divides and preserving vanishing knowledge. His legacy continues to inspire researchers and adventurers alike, reminding us of the value of cultural immersion, adaptability, and respect for diverse ways of life. Thank you for joining us on this exploration of Frank Cushing's remarkable life and contributions. Until next time, keep exploring, keep learning, and remember, every culture has a story to tell. Welcome, listeners, to today's episode where we'll dive into a fascinating chapter of Southwest desert history that combines scientific exploration, ambitious dreams, and heated controversy. Our story takes us back to the late 19th century, to the scorching expanse of the Colorado Desert, where one man's observation sparked a nationwide debate about transforming an arid wasteland into a vast inland sea. Our tale begins with Dr. J.P. Whitney, a U.S. Army surgeon who found himself traversing the harsh landscape of the Colorado Desert. As he rode his horse through this unforgiving terrain, Little did he know that his observations would soon capture the imagination of a nation and earn this desolate basin the moniker of the Whitney Sea. In January 1873, Dr. Whitney published an article in the Overland Monthly, describing a peculiar sight that caught his eye during his desert expeditions. He noticed a consistent, well-defined line along the mountainsides, reminiscent of an ancient shoreline. Upon closer inspection, he found evidence that supported his theory of a long-lost sea in this now parched land. Whitney's keen eye observed rocks worn smooth up to a certain level, as if by the constant washing of water. He noted coarse coral formations in the crevices and on the sides of these rocks. Above this line, the rocks remained sharp and jagged, untouched by the hypothetical waters of this ancient sea. But it wasn't just the rocks that piqued Whitney's interest. Along what he believed to be the former shoreline, he discovered countless seashells. Some were minute, others fragile, resembling the kind one might find in sheltered arms of the sea. He was particularly struck by delicate bivalves, about an inch wide and an inch and a half long, with shells barely thicker than a few sheets of paper. As a man of medicine, Dr. Whitney was accustomed to reasoning from effect to cause. Holding these fragile shell fragments in his hands, he couldn't help but ponder their origin and survival. How could these delicate remnants withstand the constant battering of wind and sand? He estimated that they could not have endured for more than a few centuries at most. This observation led Whitney to a startling conclusion. He was standing on the bed of a relatively recently vanished sea. He envisioned a time when the land bloomed and flourished, a stark contrast to the current landscape where lone whirlwinds raised columns of sand hundreds of feet into the air. After multiple explorations of this thermal waste, as he called it, Whitney developed a theory about the formation and disappearance of this inland sea. He proposed that the Colorado River, which empties into the Gulf of California, had spent centuries depositing the red mud from Arizona's northern plateaus at its mouth. Over time, this process created a massive delta that eventually cut off the desert basin from the Gulf. Once isolated, the trapped water slowly evaporated, leaving behind the scorched landscape Whitney observed. But Dr. Whitney wasn't content with merely theorizing about the past. He saw an opportunity to reshape the future of the American Southwest. Upon returning to Los Angeles, he began to expound his theories to the public, arguing that the drying up of this inland sea had caused significant climatic changes in the surrounding regions. Whitney's proposal was bold and visionary: restore the ancient sea. He contended that by bringing back this massive body of water, beneficial climatic conditions would return to the stricken areas. Even California, already blessed with a favorable climate, would see positive effects. Rainfall, he argued, would increase substantially. To support his claims, Whitney provided some striking calculations. He estimated that evaporation from this restored sea would be enough to supply 12 inches of rain to an area more than double the size of Ohio, if all the moisture were to be recondensed and precipitated. As one might expect, Whitney's proposal was met with immediate skepticism and criticism. Critics scoffed at the idea of humans making a sea, some even calling it blasphemous. But Whitney had an answer ready: divert the Colorado River into the basin. He acknowledged that the flow of the Colorado might not be sufficient to fill the entire basin, but argued that even partially filling the northern portion would help mitigate the desiccating winds born in this desert furnace. The local press quickly latched onto the story, sensing its news value. The Los Angeles Star trumpeted Whitney's ideas, calling for Congress to appoint a scientific commission to study the practicality, cost, and potential effects of the project. The newspaper praised Whitney's views as sound in every particular, and urged California, Arizona, Nevada, and Utah delegations in Congress to demand government action. As news of Whitney's proposal spread, it captured the public imagination. The Whitney Sea became a hot topic of conversation across the nation, discussed in parlors, barbershops, and bars. The scientific community took notice as well, with at least one college conferring a master's degree on Dr. Whitney for his contribution to science in the nation. Learned debates erupted among savants, arguing the merits and potential pitfalls of the plan. Some enthusiastic supporters advocated for the immediate formation of a company to begin digging a canal from the Colorado River to the basin, eager to start filling this natural bathtub without delay. Others pushed for cartographic changes, insisting that all maps should be updated to reflect the future Whitney Sea rather than the outdated Colorado Desert. But not everyone was convinced. Skeptics raised concerns about potential negative consequences. Some worried that increased moisture in the air would lead to a rise in malaria cases. Others speculated about the effects on local flora and fauna, conjuring images of orange trees growing to the height of sequoias and bearing pumpkin-sized fruit, or harmless garter snakes evolving into menacing boa constrictors. The controversy surrounding the Whitney Sea Proposal soon caught the attention of political figures. None other than General John C. Fremont, then serving as the governor of Arizona Territory, took an interest in the matter. Known as the Pathfinder for his earlier explorations of the American West, Fremont saw potential in the idea and decided to bring it to the attention of the federal government. Fremont embarked on a journey to Washington, D.C. to present the subject to his superiors. His involvement lent credibility to Whitney's proposal and elevated the discussion to a national level. The prospect of transforming a vast desert into a productive region captured the imagination of many politicians who saw it as a way to expand America's agricultural and economic frontiers. While the debate raged on, fueled by a mix of scientific speculation, economic ambition, and pure fantasy, one crucial aspect had been overlooked: the mathematical feasibility of the project. It took General George Stoneman, a practical-minded resident of Los Angeles, to bring some much-needed perspective to the discussion. Addressing a shocked audience in Los Angeles, Stoneman laid out the stark realities of the proposed project. He started by outlining the dimensions of the basin, as described by proponents of the Whitney Sea, 300 miles long, 50 miles wide, and 300 feet deep, roughly the size of Lake Erie. Then, Stoneman dropped his bombshell. To fill such a basin in just 1 year, assuming a watertight bottom and no evaporation, would require a stream 20 miles wide, 20 feet deep, with a current of 3 miles an hour. Put another way, using a more realistic stream size of 1,000 feet wide, 10 feet deep, and running at 3 miles an hour, it would take 200 years to fill the basin. But the general wasn't done yet. He pointed out that even after filling this massive lake, it would require a constant inflow of water to compensate for evaporation. His calculations showed that a river about the size of the Colorado at ordinary stages, 250 feet wide, 10 feet deep, and flowing at 5 miles per hour, would be needed just to offset the estimated 18 inches of yearly evaporation. Stoneman's mathematical analysis effectively burst the bubble of the Whitney Sea dream. He humorously compared Whitney's proposal to Archimedes' famous claim about moving the world with a lever and fulcrum, suggesting that Whitney believed he could create a sea if only given enough greenbacks or government funding. The general concluded his reality check with a poignant observation. He suggested that long before any human effort could fill the basin with water, the great engineer of the universe, nature itself, would have filled it with the sands of the desert, driven by the prevailing northern winds. While some might quibble with the precise accuracy of Stoneman's calculations, his intervention was sufficient to dampen the enthusiasm for the sea-building project. The hard numbers he presented made it clear that the Whitney Sea, however appealing in theory, was simply not feasible in practice. Although the grand vision of the Whitney Sea never materialized, the story didn't end there. In the years that followed, the Colorado Desert did see significant changes, though not in the form of a vast inland sea. Irrigation projects gradually brought water to parts of the vast wasteland. Farms and ranches began to dot the desert floor, transforming areas that were once thought uninhabitable. Cities like Coachella, Indio, Brawley, El Centro, and Calexico sprouted up, bringing the touch of human civilization to a land that Dr. Whitney had described as filled with only the glare of the never-ending sand and the silence of death. Looking back on the Whitney Sea controversy, we can see it as a fascinating chapter in the history of the American West. It represents a unique intersection of scientific observation, ambitious engineering, environmental speculation, and public imagination. Dr. Whitney's proposal, while ultimately impractical, speaks to the spirit of his time, an era when the vast expanses of the American West seemed to invite grand schemes and transformative projects. It was a period when the power of human engineering was beginning to reshape landscapes on an unprecedented scale, and the idea of creating an inland sea didn't seem entirely outlandish. The story also highlights the importance of rigorous scientific and mathematical analysis in evaluating such grand proposals. General Stoneman's intervention serves as a reminder of the value of clear-headed, quantitative thinking in the face of exciting but potentially unrealistic ideas. Moreover, the Whitney Sea controversy foreshadowed many of the environmental and engineering debates that would come to characterize the 20th and 21st centuries. Questions about the wisdom and feasibility of large-scale environmental modification, the potential unintended consequences of such projects, and the balance between human ambition and natural limitations continue to be relevant today. If you were to visit the site where Dr. Whitney once sat atop his horse, scanning the red rock cliffs, you would find that, in many ways, the silence of the desert still reigns. The vast inland sea he envisioned never came to be, and it's unlikely that the silence will ever be broken by the wash of waves on a shoreline. Thank you for joining us on this journey through a fascinating chapter of American Southwest history. Until next time, keep exploring, keep questioning, and never stop dreaming big, but always remember to check your math. Thank you for joining your desert frontiersman Alan for more Southwest Tales. Please leave a like, comment, and share. For further desert romps, hit the subscribe button. Hit the bell to be notified of new videos. If you would like to help support my channel and time, hit the super thanks heart icon on the bottom of the video and contribute. This is very helpful. Happy trails.